the language we use at all times is so crucial. Maintaining distinctiveness is actually something that we want to do. Tolerance is, for me, is a very bad word. I try not to use it.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Miles. Thank you so much, first of all, for joining us here at IILM and being part of the IILM Samvad series, a multidisciplinary platform where we discuss issues of contemporary relevance. So I'll just, dive into the questions first.
Right in.
Right in. So in your lifetime, you have seen a lot of fragmentation in the society, be it wars, increasing immigration issues, mass migrations, polarizations. And also as someone who is working in geopolitics, I also see how, policies, public policies or foreign policies can either deepen these divides that already exist in the society or resolve them.
Mm-hmm.
So the topic of today's discussion is nationhood and fragments. So when I say that, what strikes you first?
So I'm going to be political at the very outset and say the language we use at all times is so crucial. And we will have a hopefully relaxed, fun 35 minutes. You will ask questions, but you can't monitor your language all the time. So we let things slip out. But you just associated, I'm sure accidentally, immigration with fragmentation. Now there will be politicians on the far right throughout Western Europe, increasingly in the US and elsewhere, who link these two things. Now in my country, for example, we have probably the most wonderful thing about the whole country is 3 letters, NHS. Does anyone know what that stands for? Oh, thank you. Yeah. So could you imagine how wonderful it would be if India had an NHS? Free accessibility for everybody to get medical care. The National Health Service is totally stocked with immigrant workers. They're not fragmenting our country, they're underpinning our country. So just one example that the language that we use is so important. So I see the increasing numbers of immigrants as definitely a challenge. It's trite to say that it's an opportunity as well. It's a challenge, and part of the challenge is that the challenge is not met equally across the country. People come to different areas of the country at different times and at different speeds. And some people can live very comfortably in one area and not be affected by those challenges at all. Other people in other areas are very much affected by those challenges. Controversial enough from the outset?
Yes, but thanks for being political. So in geopolitics, we look at these macro factors like borders, foreign policy, governance, administration. For decades, you studied those micro factors. How do you perceive others in a group or outside the group? Now, do you think from your own studies, can you, help us understand through an example or a story where a small contact intervention positively brought about broader societal, cohesion or changes positively? And do you think that kind of interventions can really bring in a broader social cohesion, small
Yes, it's naturally very ambitious to say, can a small intervention, a small change improve things on a wider scale? I give you an example. You mentioned Northern Ireland in your very kind introduction. So Northern Ireland you probably have all heard of the conflict in Northern Ireland without any very deep understanding of it. And the same is actually true of British people too. They hear about it all in the background. They don't really know much about it. It was only when I began to study it that I began to read further into the politics and the history and so on. So Northern Ireland has these 2 large, until quite recently, they're almost exactly the same size, a Catholic community and a Protestant community. You might view them from India and say, oh, they're very similar. They're both Christians, and I'm a Sikh, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Hindu. So they look very similar to you. And if I got them in a room, they would sound similar to you. They would probably look similar to you, but they mostly grow up completely separated from each other. And this is what the American legal scholars call de facto segregation, not de jure. It's not by law, it's just by fact, by choice. So they go at a very young age. They go to elementary school, primary school, then they go to secondary school. And until maybe 30, 40 years ago, 30 perhaps, the major university in the country was called Queen's University Belfast, the capital city of Northern Ireland. Anything with the word Queen or Royal in has links to the Protestant community. So this would not be seen as a very welcoming community to join if you were a Catholic student. So how can you bring these people together and do just fairly minor experiences help? And actually that's what the research shows, is that if you go from nothing to one encounter, that one encounter makes a real difference. So what attitude researchers and consumer researchers talk about as experience with the attitude object. You know, when you go around these, you probably have stores like this in India now where they're trying to sell you something new. So they have someone standing at a little table and they give you free food, free drink. And what they're doing there is they're overcoming the first step in getting you to experience the attitude object, because you taste Coca-Cola, or you eat this new kind of cheese, or you try some other product. And what you're doing in encountering people from different groups is you're having a similar first experience. And we found that in schools, just relatively low-level encounters, school pupils from one kind of school coming together with pupils from another, they have a lesson in biology or drama, something else. Even though they're wearing different school uniforms, they're visibly different, they go back to where they've come from, it still makes some difference just to have this little taste of experiencing the other group and finding that they are remarkably similar to you in some ways, but they are also different. They are distinct from you in other ways. And we know from the social psychology of groups that maintaining distinctiveness is actually something that we want to do. We don't want to give that up.
Even people who had never met someone from another group become more tolerant by simply seeing others mix with each other. I hope I got it
Absolutely, right. Yeah. So we call this extended contact. It's where if you think of the religious group to which you belong, each of you as an individual, you probably think for a second and you think about who are most of your friends and your family. They probably belong to that same religious group. And perhaps you currently have no friends who belong to a different religious group. But suddenly you come to university, unfortunately you're not freshers. If you were freshers, you would be a perfect example, because you're freshers, you might come to a new university, find a new classmate who does come from this different group. And you might make a positive interaction with that person. And your friend who belongs to the same group as you observes you forming this interaction and says, oh, well, they can't be as bad as I thought they were, because my friend Aswani is having a pleasant interaction with that out-group member. So this lowers your anxiety, increases your confidence that you too could have this kind of interaction, and encourages you to take up opportunities for contact.
So if we have to implement this sort of an experiment, do you think that can nudge us towards better urban policies?
Absolutely. And you know, when you come towards the end of your career, it's a bit like coming to the end of your university study. You think of all the things you did and you enjoyed doing, and then you think, oh, I wish I had gone to more lectures on this, or I wish I had talked to more people doing that. So I tried for a long time to reach out and find people who were working in architecture and urban studies, and I never really managed to make that connection. But there are people who are interested in doing this kind of thing, and can plan things in a way to promote this interaction. But it's very, very difficult, and it doesn't always work out exactly as you think. So I'll give you an example. Anyone here been to Singapore? Excellent, lots of people. Okay, so Singapore is interesting because it has 82%, I think it is, 82% of its housing stock is publicly owned. If you've been there, you'll see these enormous great skyscrapers called HDB, I think, Housing Development Board apartments. They are flats available at very cheap government-controlled rents. And because when Lee Kuan Yew became the leader of Singapore, there had been considerable ethnic conflict in the region between ethnic Malays, ethnic Chinese, and ethnic Indians, he said, we will appropriate the vast majority of housing stock, and each of these blocks must comprise people from each of the groups. And again, this is one of my regrets. We didn't get around to doing this. I tried to get started on a project to look at this. But one of the things that we did find out was actually, you can imagine a really big block. Who has the best view? The people right up near the top. These rents are more expensive. Who lives in these groups? In these stories, primarily ethnic Chinese groups. So how much interaction is there between people? We talk about going in through the front door and resegregating. So this is an intervention aimed at desegregating, but it can quickly lead to resegregating.
Okay, so is this also this intergroup contact theory?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's one of your seminal works, and the idea that meaningful, sustained contact between different groups can reduce prejudice. Now, just taking it out of Singapore to India, and for a country as large, and I heard that you've backpacked across India in your younger years a lot. So for a country as vast, as diverse as India, how do you think this contact look like at a big scale to make it enough to matter and bring some sort of a change? And do you think policy could nudge that change?
I absolutely do think policy can nudge that change, and politics maybe even more so. So you have to always be very careful when you're a visitor in another country about what you say and what you don't say. But if you really want to promote better integration between certain groups, you have to have that leadership from the top, encouraging. So I will politically, diplomatically step aside from India, and I give you an example of the current British Prime Minister. My politics are of a different flavor, so I would have voted for the Labour Party, currently in power, current leader Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer made a very, very unfortunate speech recently because he's worried about the rise of the right wing. And he's trying to get these voters to come back into his party and not stray to the right. And he talked about the UK being a nation of strangers. This is his way of trying to come to terms with the fact that there were immigrant groups and that some people felt oppressed, swamped, threatened by these. And this was a very, very unfortunate tone of phrase, right, which he had to apologize for shortly afterwards. Because again, I refer to the National Health Service. You know, I have an elderly father. My father is 96 and he'd been in and out of hospital in the last few weeks. Every single time you go to hospital, among the nurses, the anaesthetists, the surgeons, the radiographers, there's a very, very strong ethnic minority present. We are not nations of strangers. And so the language you use. One other thing about the language, I learned this in the course of my career, because Americans talk a lot about tolerance. And you find yourself sometimes using the language of prejudice, sometimes the language of tolerance. I try now very, very hard. So if I use it, you can throw something at me. If I use it, I try to stop myself, because what does it mean to be tolerant? If you think of the language, the etymology, to be tolerant means there's something that you must tolerate. Why should I tolerate you just because you're of a different nationality or your skin color is different from me? There's nothing to tolerate. It's like the Irish say, we are strangers who have not yet become friends. There's an opportunity there. But tolerance for me is a very bad word. I try not to use it.
Do you see AI as a net amplifier of this overarching existing divides? Or do you think AI can actually be designed or deployed in ways in which that genuinely create understanding across groups? And the reason I'm asking is because it's like the air that exists everywhere. All of us are breathing but it's touching everything that we do, but I think we're not really able to understand the implications on our behavior. And
that's a fantastic question. It's a really, really deep question. And we all know that AI is based on our previous experiences, the previous questions that we've put in, and this dreadful word, the algorithms. Okay, so we know that Mark Zuckerberg and all these other friends out there who are connected with these things, they could do all of these things if they wanted to, because they managed very easily to send right-wing news to people who are interested in right-wing activities, and conspiracy theory links to people who are interested in conspiracy theories. So they could easily, and they could even set up a large-scale randomized trial to do this. You could say, you know what? I've got these people who are interested in nerdy things like computers, and I've got these other people who are interested in, because I love it, but I think cricket is nerdy. Cricket is a national passion in India, but it's nerdy in the UK. So I recently had the pleasure of going to 2 days of international cricket. Who followed the England-India cricket? Oh my God, what have the rest of you been doing with your summer? We had the most exciting series of cricket this summer. I went to one day at Lord's and another day at the Oval. It was fantastic there. All these people in the India shirts, supporting, clapping everything good that India did, mixed, sitting next door to the white British people, having a great party together. Why don't you find algorithms to connect people who have similar interests, but deliberately make sure you make some connections that are across other kinds of lines, not just race or ethnicity, but also politics, for example. I mean, when we had our do you know what Brexit is? You do. So we realized in the debate we were having in the UK about should we leave the EU, we realized that we were becoming very, very compartmentalized. It was like a real-life non-contact experiment. So there was a time when I realized I only knew one person in the whole country, knew personally, who was pro-Brexit, and that was my father. And you know, he's 96. You don't try and change people's opinion when they're 96. Not if he's my dad, anyway. So you realize then this is happening across the country, and it was splitting some families, splitting them up so they no longer had anything to do with each other. But we should be able to talk. This is right back to fragmentation, because perhaps the major cleavage, the major divide in our societies today isn't so much ethnicity anymore. It's actually political differences. I mean, I'm always amazed when I look at these Trump rallies, and Trump rallies have many African American people present. I can't for the life of me think why an African American would want to support that. But then you think for a minute and think, well, that's my bad, if you like, you know, because actually African Americans are just like white Americans. They range from poor to rich. They range from public sector to entrepreneurs. There's a certain kind of Black American who finds his or her company in Trump. I shouldn't be surprised at all. And actually, it's probably a good thing that they are there, some of them, because what would be much worse would be to have one party that was only supported by white people and one that was only supported by Black people.
Very interesting. Now, closing question. I wanted to just ask, you have been researching human divisions and connections for decades. Now, what gives you hope? And what keeps you believing that connection is still possible, no matter what your algorithms say, no matter what social media campaigns do, and no matter what governments and geopolitics really, facilitate?
Two things, I think. One is data, and one is kids. So I can't remember who once said this. He said, in the absence of data, I'm just another guy with an opinion. So I'm not giving you my opinion. I can refer to the facts. I can refer to refer to small, highly connected experiments. So we've done some experiments. For example, we did some in Cyprus, divided island of Cyprus, where we had Greek and Turkish Cypriots interacting with each other, one of whom was paid by us as the experimenters, and they had this very positive interaction, and they were watched through a one-way mirror or a closed-circuit TV. They were watched by a friend of the one Greek Cypriot student. And for the people who took part actively and the people who watched passively, this interaction was very positive. So we know this can happen under controlled conditions, but I also do these large-scale studies where we went out and we studied many tens of thousands of participants in places. I know that contact works there. We did a study quite recently on thousands of children in Northern Ireland. We followed them up over a 5-year period. We could show there was some small but reliable effect of this mixing. And the effect is small. You don't change a bigot to a liberal overnight. But if you nudge one person, there are people who do research on computer modeling using these kind of approaches. If you nudge one person's behavior a little bit, and that person nudges somebody else, then you suddenly get, in your social network, you get all these rippling effects. And you can calculate, well, probably this interaction has been related to a significant positive change of attitudes in thousands of people across the country. That's got to be worth doing. Kids, briefly, kids, we talked about the Jesuits last night, the Jesuits, the Catholic priests who had a great interest in education. And they very much believed that you should get somebody when they were young, malleable, changeable, moldable, and turn them into what you wanted them to be. What we want to do is we want to stop people growing up with segregation, and you want people to grow up with integration. One of the delights of my life now that I am, how shall I put it, a little bit older than most of you, is that I'm a grandfather just recently, and I go on a Friday and I look after my granddaughter and have such fun with her, and I learn about the place where my daughter is living, which is a city called Brighton, about 2 hours from where I live. Brighton is undertaking a really radical experiment on education, which is random allocation of pupils to schools. Now, what used to happen in a state school system is people would move to big houses in affluent areas where the schools would be better, and that would immediately shut other people out of that market. And there's a really interesting idea here that you might actually be a child from a much less well-off background, randomly allocated to this good school. Equally, you might be a child from an affluent background whose parents encourage them to study, and you may be allocated to another student. If you can get that to work so that it brings everybody up and not everybody down, that's a wonderful social intervention. And we don't have the data on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Miles. Really, thank you so much for a very thoughtful conversation. It's wonderful to know that social cohesion is not something that we have inherited, but it's something that we consciously built. So on behalf of IILM University, my wonderful students, staff, faculty, and the IILM Samvad series, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.